The biggest tech IPO globally for 2024, transitioning from an ops to a tech company. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Yi-Wei, current CPO of Talabat. Welcome to Breaking Down Barriers, which is all around building and scaling in the region, where we get to hear from the builders and makers finally.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
So I'm going to get straight into it. Now that you've done an IPO, how do you start to think about your job as an executive?
The IPO journey has been really great. I think going through the entire journey, we get to look very introspectively about ourselves, but also an opportunity for us to tell the story of where we want to be in the next 2 to 3 years. A lot of people look at me and they ask, so, you're done now, huh? You're ready to retire? I think it's quite the opposite. I actually think the journey's just begun and this is day one. Whenever we've been talking about Talabat and the company, we've been talking about how big the opportunity is here in the MENA region, right? We started a long time ago, 20 years ago, as a food delivery company. We then moved into groceries and retail a couple of years ago with our own dark stores and local shops. And as we've expanded, we've also learned that there's so many other opportunities for us to expand into, whether it's regions that we haven't tapped into within the countries that we're in, or new verticals that we need to go and penetrate a little bit further in. And there's just so much more to be done, so many more customer problems to solve, so many more vendor problems to solve. So we're really excited to use tech to actually propel these journeys forward.
Awesome. And what does it mean then to be a CPO in an IPO company?
I think it means we really have to think long game. I think when you're a publicly listed company, also you have a responsibility to not just the customers that you serve, but also your shareholders, that you really think and do the right things in the long run, right? So a lot of times I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how tech plays out in the next 3 to 5 year horizon. What are the bets that we need to make now? What are the bets that we need to make in 3 years? And sort of build towards that, as we go.
Mm. And does that come with its own sort of nuances and challenges in terms of like managing the boardroom, especially both during and then after as well, in terms of how you then move forward as a company?
I think to a strong degree, we've been part of Delivery Hero Group, for a very long time, which is a publicly listed company. So it's not that new to us. But I think most definitely for the region and for, everyone who's invested in Talabat in the last little while, everyone's really curious and excited about what we're investing in. So we've been telling the story about how we're using tech to solve, for example, grocery problems, how we've been using tech to optimize, our rider fleet and make things a lot more efficient and safer for our riders. So it's definitely a lot more interest, in the region for that. And we're trying to tell that story from a tech perspective.
No, exciting. And the killer question, and how did you transition from an ops to a tech company?
Yeah, Talabat, we're 20 years old, and we started in a basement in Kuwait somewhere, and we've expanded since to 8 different markets. I was hired about 5 years ago. When I joined Talabat, I would say that we were just in the beginning of our tech transformation, right? I remember when I joined, we were trying to define what a product manager is. We were trying to define what a design role looks like. We were trying to define how product and engineering and design sort of come together. And that transformation really took time. And sort of side by side with that is working with the business much more closely to help show how tech can really accelerate our business objectives, right? Whether that be, bringing more customers through the door, whether that be making our rider fleets more efficient, or whether that be making our ad products a lot more, ROI positive for our vendors. I think a lot of that underpinning is actually tech. And so we spent the last 4 years really working very, very closely with our business partners, business counterparts to really make that happen. And that transition took time. And I think it took sort of us deepening our familiarity with the industry, familiarity with our business counterparts, speaking that language, and working very closely with each other to solve for, at the end of the day, for the key customer problems. And through that, unlocked a lot of trust within amongst ourselves in the company, and that allowed us to transition from sort of an ops-heavy company to a tech company.
And did you identify like real key challenges, especially obviously the tech enablement as well? And obviously you said it's been like a four-year journey as well, and you need to have the right people on the right seat on the bus on that as well. And it sounds like you talk a lot about the history of Talabat as well, which is really important to tell that story so people on board with that vision, right?
Yeah, I think it's actually really hard to find an area of Talabat where you don't see tech influencing it. I mean, even if we think about the finance team, which you think about it, it's quite far away from what tech is. We actually play a really big role in processing, for example, payments for tens of thousands of restaurants on a weekly basis. How do you manage, the fleet of more than 100,000 riders? Like all of that actually, as operational as that sounds, and you're like, oh, is there really tech? There's plenty of tech that goes there. So there wasn't a shortage of problems to solve. And how we prioritize and how we solve for that is, I sit down with the rest of the management team and we really understand what are the biggest problems for the company. And when we understand that, we then apply all sorts of lenses to it. What's the ops lens? What's a commercial lens? What's the product and tech lens to solve this problem together? And I think through that, we're able to then move forward together as a company. I think one thing that's quite unique about our industry, and as a CPO of a food and grocery delivery business at the moment, is there's very little that I can do that doesn't require a commercial or an operational counterpart. At the end of the day, like we're here in the business to serve and bring food and groceries from one place to another. You're not just here to use the app. We're not Netflix, right? We deliver food and groceries and your pharmacy products. So we have to work very closely with our ops teams to make that happen. And so that's an exciting part of our industry. It also makes it super challenging to be a CPO of a company that operates that way.
And is it sometimes actually being on the ground to understand the customer? Is that some of the initiatives that kind of take place, and kind of the future kind of innovation is acceleration of AI as well into the kind of the business?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to be super on the ground. One of our key company principles is called diving deep. And one thing that I did, especially when I first joined Talabat, was I used to speak to at least 2 to 3 customers every week. Right, I would call them up and we would speak for an hour. And the first question I would ask them very simply is, hey, tell me about your last Talabat order. What did you order? And what's the occasion? Did you buy groceries? Did you buy, food for your family? Were you throwing a party? And through that very simple question, I sort of unpack how did they decide to open Talabat? How did they decide what to order? How did they decide, how to pay? Do they pay cash? Do they pay on credit card? And I get to understand the psyche of our customer base and what they're going through, the struggles that they have. And one product idea that actually came out of this was when I started to speak to more and more customers, one thing that we realized was, when I spoke to customers in sort of week 2 to 3 of pay week, I realized that they would be a bit more hesitant to say, I bought Talabat, blah, blah, blah. Because we learned that actually in week 3 of the month, people actually buy less food on food delivery. Why? It's because they're waiting to get paid.
Yeah.
And so we start to realize, for example, that we have potentially an affordability problem in the region. And one product that we built out of that was our postpaid product, which we now avail anywhere between 2,000 to a couple hundred, 200 to a couple hundred dirham credit to some of our customers. Where they can then use this to actually buy food, or groceries, or whatever they need, and pay in 30 days. And so that unlocked a real customer problem that we had that came out of some of the customer insights that came out of the conversations.
Pay later for your food.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And do you see, as we obviously just at the right time of month, do you see different trends then going into January where people want to be healthier and spend less money on food and takeaways?
Definitely. I think one thing that we're focusing a lot on is allowing people to really understand what goes into their food and also make selections based on that. So one experience that we've developed very recently is called the veg filter. There's a lot of people who are also a lot more conscious about, I want to eat less meat, I want to be more vegetarian. So we're actually tagging items as vegetarian, we're tagging restaurants as vegetarian. So it also allows people to very quickly figure out what's healthy and what's not, and what's vegetarian and what's not. And we're going to do more and more of that. We want to sort of put the keys in our consumers' hands to really know and choose, food and grocery products that are good for them.
No, 100%, and that's great to hear as well. And obviously on you then, so you transitioned and you moved from Southeast Asia and you came to the region. What drove that? And the reason why I asked that is because we're at that sort of fundamental point now as companies are going to continue to grow and build and scale, and more unicorns, more IPOs. The reality is you're going to need to bring in executives and expertise from out of the region because there just isn't enough here. So what drove that decision for you? And then second part to that question is then what's been the challenges of building and scaling teams and companies here?
Look, I'm a bit of a nomad, I would say. Dubai is city number 8 for me, and I've moved around a lot. So growing up, I grew up in Malaysia, then moved to Hong Kong when I was in middle school, and Beijing when I was in high school. I did my undergrad in Canada, and then I worked in Canada and the US and Singapore. And I worked in sort of big tech companies and smaller startups. And life finds a way, and that's how I ended up in Dubai. That's how I explain it to people. I moved here 6 years ago, and the tech scene was very different. I mean, we all worked out of this building called Shatta Tower. That's where Careem was headquartered, Property Finder was headquartered, Checkout.com was headquartered there, Dubizzle at some point was headquartered there. And I joined, at the time, Property Finder as VP of Product. And I moved here sort of serendipitously. I actually came here as a product coach. One of the weekends, I was hired to come to Property Finder to sort of help them with the product transformation journey and coach the product team and the data team and the design team, how everyone should come together, how to do OKRs and how to do commercial planning. And through that experience, I was exposed to Dubai. At the time, my wife and I just got married, and we were looking for sort of a new adventure, and the opportunity to come to Dubai through Property Finder came up, and we said yes to a wild ride. And one thing led to another. It just so happened that we caught the Middle East and probably the biggest boom in tech that I've seen, right? And fortunately, I've seen a similar experience in Southeast Asia. So I moved to Singapore in 2015, just in the middle of the tech boom, in Singapore and Indonesia, and a lot of funding going to that. So I'm actually seeing in many ways a similar sort of surge here in the Middle East, probably at a more intense magnitude.
Yeah.
And it's been great to see and be part of that journey. What's been challenging? Well, 6 years ago, it was challenging to hire people. I mean, it was very hard to convince people to move to Dubai to begin with 6 years ago, right? You had sort of tech talent that was in the US, tech talent that was in Europe, tech talent that was in Singapore that said yeah, Dubai, but what is there really a tech scene there? And those were kinds of the questions I would get. What is it like living in the Middle East? It, really wasn't known.
Do you still get that now, by the way?
Much less. I think that the Dubai government obviously has done a fantastic job opening up the doors, whether through the Golden Visa program or just showcasing the tech companies that have come out of the region. Hopefully, through Careem, Talabat, and a few of these exits that have happened, it sort of promotes the vibrancy of the tech scene. I think that's done a really great job to so that I don't have to answer the question why Dubai anymore. And now I'm seeing friends who used to work with me whether in Singapore, whether in Europe, really considering coming to the region. So I think the narrative's changing. I think Dubai is becoming a great place for tech sort of expats and tech execs to live. And I think given the opportunity size of the Middle East, I actually think it's a fantastic place for passionate and great product people to set foot and build the future of the Middle East in.
So you definitely think in terms of next 2 to 3 years it will get a lot easier in terms of building and scaling teams? Or I mean, hiring is always going to be hard, right? I think people have been in a bit of a bubble maybe the last 2 years where there's obviously been a transition in the market and there's a lot more talent available. Yeah. But at the same time, I'm always of the view A players normally never looking for a job. You always need to attract them and nurture them and have relationships over a period of time.
Hiring's gotten easier in some ways, right? Like I said, you don't have to explain what Dubai is anymore, but I agree with you that top talent's really hard to attract. But beyond that, I think what's even harder to preserve and build is culture. We've spent in the last 4 to 5 years at Talabat really building what it means to be a real tech company. We have now 480 people in product and engineering and data and design, shaping the future of Talabat, and the culture of using tech to shape the business, to shape the future of a company is not the norm, I would say, for most even startups in the region. I think my sense of what's different here is you have a lot of very commercial first founders who may be founders from a domain, founders from particular experience who've come up and say, hey, I want to start a company and a startup in this space. But they aren't tech first. Compare that to many other startups, whether in Silicon Valley or Asia. You get a lot more former CTOs or CPOs or product people or tech people starting things, being tech first. So I think it's going to be a slightly longer journey for the Middle East to have sort of this tech first mindset of how do we leverage technology to really springboard ourselves into solving some really big challenging problems that we have. And I'm excited to see that and the evolution for the next, I would say, 3, 4, 5 years here in the region.
100%, especially when you align with the tech first piece. I think a lot of what I see is obviously a lot of ex-Korean people. Not necessarily that's a bad thing, but it'd be nice to see that transition and change over the coming years as well. And for you, like, what do you wish that you kind of know now, which would have helped and benefited you probably early part in your kind of product career as well?
I think when you're a product person, everyone always looks to you for an answer. I remember one of my first weeks as a product manager. I joined Microsoft as a very junior and early product manager just in their new grad program. And I walk into the room, probably a week or two into my job, and the senior PM of the team was away on holiday. And this team of 10 or 11 engineers then looked to me and said, all right, cool. Like, so what do we work on next? And I was like, okay, I'm 2 weeks here into the job and I have no idea. And I felt the need to, at the time, sort of make up an answer, say, oh, this is the thing we pull up in the backlog for whatever reason. And I think it's drilled sort of into a product manager's head very early on in their career that they need to know all the answers all the time. And as I've evolved as a product manager, as a product leader, the more I realize that, I don't need to know all the answers. That, the fact that we're in an ambiguous product role and using technology to solve problems inherently means that it's an open-ended problem, odds are, and there are many solutions and many angles that we can take to this. So our job is to help continuously bring clarity to what the potential answers and solutions could be. We know that 1 in 10, 1 in 50 tech companies and startups make it. So it's not that the other 49, are big failures, but like they maybe are in the wrong place, wrong time, and that's the nature of tech, right? That you have to take a bet and you have to learn and you have to push yourself forward. And as product leaders, you got to be very okay not knowing all the answers all the time. So now I think, if I were to tell my 20-year-old self again, starting in product, what I would do differently is to be okay and comfortable about not knowing all the answers and wrestle with that complexity, wrestle with data, wrestle with customer insights, wrestle with competitive insights to get to that clarity, but don't feel the need to just be the know-it-all all the time everywhere you go.
No, very good answer. And I think that's all a part of learning as well, trial and error and ideation. How do you talked about it just then, but how do you balance between gut and intuition when it comes to data and product decisions as well?
So one thing I like to tell people is that your gut sense comes from data and insights and observation, right? So if you think about, what your gut instinct is, it's basically your brain making, millions and billions of connections every second to give you an instinctive answer to a particular situation. Right? It's similar to when you drive, right? Your gut tells you, hey, I need to slam on the brake, or hey, I need to change lanes, because maybe you've driven miles and miles and miles and miles, and through all that repetition, like that pattern recognition gets into your head. I think very similarly in product, as you grow in a product career, your gut lining, as I say, gets stronger. Right? Maybe you encounter a situation where, my conversion rate just dropped by 10%. Well, if you've been in e-commerce for a while, if you've been in a product for a while, you probably have a few hypotheses that you can run with and say, my gut tells me it's either this, this, or this. That's a good thing. It's a good thing that you've had historically just data and experience that sort of guides you in a specific direction, as opposed to for you to having to boil the ocean and ask every single question to get to the end state. So I would say that, going deep and understanding data helps build the gut. And so, if you're early PM and a new PM, spend a lot of time with customers, talk to them, really understand their problems, look at data, look at that and let it tell you what it needs to tell you. And through that, you can build more and more of a gut instinct and intuition that helps you move in product decisions.
And on that, following on from that, what are your 3 core rituals in product development?
Sort of what I do to in what I think is key to running an effective product team. One is I focus a lot on people. I focus a lot on hiring top talent and raising the bar with myself and also my team to make sure that every quarter that goes by, every year that goes by, we really, step it up in terms of the talent that we hire, what we expect of each other. I think that's really key. And so I spend a lot of time actually reviewing, growth plans of our team members, hiring plans of our team members, our interview process to make sure that it's really up to par. The second thing I do is I personally sponsor between 2 to 3 top ideas and projects every quarter to 2. Nice. And that's important to me because I think as product leaders, you need to have strong conviction of things that you want to see through personally. And those are should be the 10Xers for the company, and you really need to get that going. And I would say the third ritual is we do all these product reviews at Talabat. And I think that's very core now to the way that we refine product ideas, right? So when we come in, people bring ideas in, we open it up for critique. And the goal of that is not to make a judgment call of go, no go, or good or bad. Things are rarely Boolean and black and white. It's really to help refine ideas, to make the thinking better, to really ensure that as a company, as a product organization, we really have sort of 10 out of 10 intellectual rigor in our approach of how we think about problem solving in product.
And on when it comes to product, do you think product leaders were in a bit of a bubble during that sort of 2022 period? It was just all about obviously the customer, which seems like a silly question because it should be about the customer, but they weren't really thinking about how the business makes money and the commercial acumen of it.
Yeah, I think that's I was in the 2021-2022 period, I was extremely frustrated actually because for a very long time, have been trying to shape product management as a discipline that sits in the intersection of, really understanding customers, really understanding the capabilities of technology, and really understanding how building things can help move the business forward, right? Even in, all the great product literature out there, no one says just listen to your customers and build whatever they want. It's always, how do we build products that customers love, Marty Kagan says, in a way that moves the business forward. So these two things can't be decoupled. So what you see with the most successful product leaders that eventually become CEOs of companies is that their business acumen is super strong. They understand the correlation between, in YouTube's case, watch time and ad revenue. They understand, where in the funnel people are dropping off. They understand, the right balance between customer experience and monetization. So I think it's very important for product leaders to have that sense. And I agree with you. There was a time where, that wasn't important at all. But I'm glad that we're now at that intersection in the markets where product leaders can't hide from that anymore. They're very much accountable towards delivering against those business results. And I think that transition is going to make our product discipline much stronger. And
what's your viewpoint on, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot of times anyway, of that there is no real product-led organizations in MENA, and they don't really understand what product actually is, and do the founders and board members and executives, whatever it might be, do they even understand what a CPO does? What is your kind of viewpoint on that?
So I actually really dislike the term product-led organization. I know I use it a lot, but I'm going to stop using it because I think people don't understand what it means. So I'm going to give you my definition of what I think a product-led organization is. I want us to think about a non-tech company. Let's think about a car company. Think about Toyota. If I were to ask you, are they a product-led organization? Are they? What's their product?
A vehicle.
Yeah. So their product is the Toyota Corolla, right? The Toyota Camry. So if I was the CEO of Toyota, I would say, here we are. We've launched a 2025 Toyota Camry. It's a hybrid. It's the most efficient car in its class. It's the safest in its class. And look at this amazing, cool design. Aren't we proud of this car? Now, would we say that CEO is product-led? Yes, I would say so. Why is that? Because the CEO is rallying his or her entire company around this product, what they offer to the world, right? They're offering this Toyota Camry, this thing that they're super proud of. They spent the last 5 years developing the new generation of the Toyota Camry. And from the sales guy on the floor, to the support team, to the garage in the back, to the online e-commerce team, they're obsessed over this thing which they're presenting to the world. So that's, in my mind, what a true product-led organization is, which is you're obsessed over this thing that you're producing that solves a customer problem, that delights customers, that moves the business forward. So let's take that analogy. Now, why is it that when we come to the tech world, we get so much obsession over, hey, how do we optimize this conversion rate and this metric and that metric? And I feel like the companies that are not product-led are the ones that don't focus on the thing which they present to the world, the product which they build. So I would say that a commercial founder can absolutely be product led. Just because you don't have a CPO in the company doesn't mean that you're not product led. I know plenty of founders who are super product centric, and the product may not even be a digital product. It may be, in the case of Hello Chef, food, that they bring to your house, right? And so, being product led doesn't necessarily mean a digital product or a tech product. It's just a mindset that you have about solving real customer problems, really being obsessed over, presenting something amazing to the world and rallying your entire company behind that. So that for me is what product-led organizations look like. And it just so happens that in the tech world, it usually comes in the form of really being obsessed over the technology that you build in, really obsessing over what customer problems you're solving, and usually a head of product leads that conversation. And so for me, that's what it looks like to be product-led. And I do believe, though, you're correct in the sense that I think the Middle East is sometimes lacking that still, right? I think there's a lot of people and a lot of founders who are obsessed with, I want to start a startup, but don't obsess enough of what problem am I solving and, how am I uniquely pushing the boundaries of how I solve this problem.
And the durability of it, is it still going to be around in 5-10 years?
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And obviously the acceleration of AI is changing a lot of that. And from your perspective then, what advice would you give to a founder of when is the right time to bring in a CPO?
Yeah. Whenever I've advised startups, I've always said the CPO should be the last role that you hire for in your C-suite or your management team. Why is that? If you're a product-led organization, as I sort of shared in my Toyota Camry example, you as a CEO, your company should be obsessed over this thing. And by extension, if you're the founder of this company, it should be your number one priority in your baby. Sure, some CEOs have to spend time fundraising, but as opposed to spending time on HR, or spending time on finance, or spending time on your marketing strategy, I would argue that founders should obsess over the thing that they're presenting to the world. So when you hire someone super senior, someone like a head of product, someone like a CPO, that person's going to expect that when they come in, they're given free rein to shape this car. Right? It's as if Apple very early on said, okay, yeah, I'm going to hire a chief designer and go wild. Go for it. Well, Steve Jobs wouldn't have that. He would say, no, I actually really want to shape the future of my company, and the company is the product. So I would say that for early stage founders, try and delay that decision as long as you can. I actually advise a lot of founders to, instead of hiring a head of product or CPO, hire a senior PM. Hire a senior product manager who's seen it before, who's solved problems before, who can come in and just help take the load off of you, but doesn't come in with the expectation that he or she can basically, turn the company upside down, on their whim. And so what you'll also find is that the CPO role is probably the highest churning role for a lot of startups. And a lot of times it boils down to the CPO and the CEO relationship. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times the first and most major conflict that comes up is who gets to call the shot and where the business goes and where the product goes.
I agree wholeheartedly, and that alignment there is key, and you kind of unpicked that as well in terms of bringing in a senior PM as well and letting them take off some of the load. And how do you balance the art and science of kind of product management, and how do you then ensure the right speed and quality as well?
Two big questions. So the art and science of product management is real. It comes with experience. I think a lot of times through competitive analysis or looking at data, that for me is the art of when do I trust my gut, or when do I have to dig a little bit deeper and do more product discovery. That comes with experience. The science part of it, well, the good part of it is there's not actually that much science in product management. I mean, you have some elements of it, right? There's some data science components, there's some design components, but in reality, there's no undergrad in product management. Maybe there's one or two master's programs in product management, but I don't really know what they would be teaching. So a lot of it actually is more art than it is science. I think the science is, can you do math, and do you understand how to, build delightful products? And the combination of the two usually ends up with good products. And so I would say it's a quite, you have to build instinct with it over time. And on the topic of speed versus quality, I think a lot of, I get this a lot about, hey, if we go, we can either build it fast with high quality or cheap. I don't know, it's some triangle which people present to me. But in reality, I think one thing that we've learned scaling, we're a 480 person product and tech organization now, is that speed and quality are inherently connected. And let me explain why. We've made decisions in the past and very painfully had to reverse when we said, we're going to take shortcuts left, right, and center. Yeah. And let's see what happens. We get out the door, we learn, one of our early products, one of our new verticals that we launched, we sort of hacked our way through it. We launched it. And just as it got traction, we were like, oh, actually, that hack is not going to work anymore. We're going to have to rebuild this.
Because some do say ship and fail fast, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely important to ship and fail fast, but you need to understand, and we can talk about this in a second, how to ship and fail fast in a way that fails you forward. I think in a lot of ways, the shortcuts that you take need to not get you into a hole. And this is where engineering experience is really important. One thing that we emphasize a lot is this concept of slicing work, which is what are the minimum pieces of customer value that you can ship along the way that isn't shortcuts in engineering decisions that you have to just completely rework, 6 months down. So that's what we focus on a lot. So for me, one thing that's really solidified in our heads is that to move fast, you have to have quality. Because if you focus on quality, it gives you the confidence to move fast. You don't have to spend, 80% of your time bug fixing, 80% of your time fighting with incidents. And really, you get to focus a lot of your time on new business opportunities, new customer problems that you get to solve. So the more that I'm in it, the more I'm convinced that to get to speed, you need to first focus on quality.
Okay. And what are the biggest mistakes companies make then during product reviews, and how does that process work at Talabat to be successful?
So our product review process involves going very deep into a topic from a few angles. One, we really try and understand what the customer problem is we're trying to solve. And my ask is, or all the PMs, is to take the customer lens of what qualitative research do you have, the anchors, what the customers are looking for, what numbers do you have to prove that there's demand for this. And we do a lot of tests, like say failing fast. We do a lot of what we call fake doors, right? We put ideas into the app that aren't ready, and we just see if people click on it, if people engage with it, right? If they engage with it, we call them and ask them, hey, why did you engage with that, and what's it all about? And through that, we have inputs. And in our product reviews, we want to first understand whether there's demand for a product like this. Then we go really deep. We go deep into the implementation. We go deep into how we're thinking about solving it. We as product leaders in the room, we try and critique each other's work to go, yeah, but what about this? What about that? The goal of it is to walk out of the room with collectively A, more confidence that we have a better solution, and B, that we've, really have each other's back, that there's intellectual rigor in the way that we've broken this problem down. So, it's not really a sign-off meeting that where I approve of, where things are go or no go. It's actually much more of a, hey, let's get together and help, each other get better at these ideas and refine these ideas to make them, much more future-proof.
And when it comes to founders, obviously hiring for product, you spoke about it earlier, obviously getting it wrong and bringing in a CPO too early, and they actually need, a senior product manager. How do they get that right then in their first product hire? Is there some key sort of metrics or things that you think that they should look for?
I would say you want to find someone who you have good chemistry with, that can really fit with exactly the stage and challenges of the company that you have. To give you a couple examples, you might be a very technically a deep tech company, I don't know, in AI, for example, and perhaps a senior PM that you need to be someone who can help accelerate, that world. Perhaps it's that. Or, you're running a cloud kitchen company, and the first PM that you need to hire maybe needs to be someone very opsy, who is an ops person turned PM and can be the right fit there. So I would say find the right chemistry for that first hire. And eventually supplement that person with other people that are complementary. And that's how I think about team building also. We're a team of now probably, 40 or 50 product managers, and everyone comes from a different background. I have PMs who come from VC. I have PMs who are ex-designers. I have PMs who are ex-data scientists. And everyone brings a lot of color to the conversation. And how I think about it is, what do we need at the moment? And how do we best utilize the talent pool that we have to make sure that we have a really strong, multi-dimensional product organization.
And what way would you it's an issue globally, but let's say in here, particularly in the region, especially with a lot of talent coming in and then leaving, how do you manage retention?
So we hire for people who are really hungry for growth, who are really hungry for challenging problems. And the great part about Talabat is that there's no shortage of challenging problems for people to solve. So there's a lot of, people who are very excited to take from what, they may be in the food business one year, and then they move to groceries another year, and they move to the subscription business another year. And so we encourage a lot of movement actually within Talabat. We were actually doing our year-end review quite recently, and you just saw the number of people that actually move teams in a year is massive. And why we do that is because we believe that once bring fresh ideas is also what helps with retention. Mm-hmm. Great product people get bored easily, and that's okay, right? If you've solved a problem and you're just there to operate a product, it gets very boring very quickly. And so the fact that we are so fast moving, that we're in so many markets, cracking so many different problems, also presents itself as a lot of opportunities for people to try new things. And I think that helps a lot with retention.
Yeah, and I think that's amazing. Having that opportunity for continuous growth and learning is key in any job. And what do you mentioned, obviously touched on there what you look for in product hires. How do you structure the interview process? You said earlier obviously about raising the bar as well. That's important to you. So how do you get that kind of those dynamics right?
So I'd like to dive deep in a product interview to really understand the types of problems that someone solves for. What I'm really trying to get to the bottom of is, how are they able to take big, ambiguous problems and how do they break it down? How do they validate things? How do they move fast and fail? How do they overcome hardship? How do they manage a team? How do they deal with commercial stakeholders? How do they, and I think when I go through a bit of a case study of something that they've gone through from top to bottom, I get a very good sense of what kind of product leader they are and what do they value and what do they prioritize. And through that, I get to sense both the product capabilities, but also culture fits. Because at the end of the day, it really, it matters to me how you solve a problem as much as whether you get to the right answer or not. But the way that you manage a team, the way that you bring energy to a room is very important to me in building the right product culture here in Talabat.
And how important is it for candidates to have domain expertise in kind of the categories as well?
Not at all important. I mean, I'll be very honest. I mean, I have moved industries a lot myself, right? I started my career as a designer, actually working at a database product at IBM. Then I moved to Microsoft as a PM for their developer platform. And then I moved to Singapore to be a PM at a B2B SaaS startup. Then I came to work in real estate tech. And then I'm in a food and grocery delivery company. So I mean, I think that good product people have the intellectual horsepower to be able to work through a bunch of different ambiguous problems and be able to solve through it. And I find that the best PMs I've hired actually have come from very different backgrounds. We have PMs who, one of our rising star PMs actually has only 2 years of product experience, but spent the last 6 or 7 years as a VC. And I think that's perfectly good because she brings something very different to the table and teaches us all about commercialization of product. And I think that's exciting. And so we focus much less on past domain expertise. And you'll see that we pretty much have never hired someone from another food delivery company. We've hired a lot of people from adjacent companies, similar concepts, maybe ride hailing, perhaps other marketplaces. But we look much more for intellectual horsepower. We look much more for culture fit. We look much more for their drive. And I think combination of all those things is what makes a successful PM at Talabat.
And based on what you said there, then would you recommend for people starting out in their career over the first 5, 8, 10 years, whatever it might be, to get as much experience in different categories
I think
as well,
it helps.
and verticals?
Yeah, I think it helps a lot. And personally, I find it super fun. I like to think that the first 10 years of your career, you're just exploring, right? And you're exploring yourself and what it means for you to be a product leader. You're exploring what industries excite you. You're exploring what kind of problems excite you. And, as we discussed very early in this podcast around the concept of intuition, you're trying to build as sort of many patterns in your head as possible. This pattern recognition is super key. And when you move to different companies and different industries and different geographies, your pattern recognition is going to overdrive. And so your gut and intuition really gets pushed and you get to build all of that in that time. And so I would say, yes, early in your career, try and do as many different things as possible to build that intuition.
I agree. We were one of the first kind of recruiters in the UK that was focused on product management before it was even a thing. It was BAs and project managers and scrum masters. But typically back then it was the broadcast businesses that were moving away from the web, moving everything over to mobile apps, connected devices, and that transition from a scrum master, agile coach into product management and what it actually is. But then what we found is those product folks or techies, they stayed in that kind of vertical for quite a long period of time, moving around to Sky, BBC, ITV, and then after 10 years, they kind of got pigeonholed. And it was then quite challenging for them to get out as the next wave in fintech in Europe as well. So I can resonate with that for sure, and would recommend that for people. And what core skills then do you feel that the best product managers have?
I think you need to be very T-shaped, actually. I think the best product managers are not just, for example, very qualitative and only know customers and talking to them and understand themes and whatnot, but they can jump between qualitative insights to quantitative insights and understand data. They need to know a bit of everything to be dangerous, sufficiently about everything to be dangerous. A bit about engineering, a bit about design, a bit about data, a bit about, customer research, and put all of that together. And what makes them special on top of that is their ability to draw all these connections, derive insights, and make really strong recommendations of how that translates into a product that can delight customers and move the business forward. So the term I use is a term that I learned at Microsoft, and they call it intellectual horsepower, and it's a very hard term to define, right? But think about, just how much intellectual raw intensity that you have to be able to just synthesize everything and drive a decision for a company is probably what I'm looking for and what I think the best product managers are made of. But also incredibly hard to put on paper, what exactly that looks like.
I was just about to ask that question.
And how to test for that. But it's sort of one of those situations where once you've worked with product leaders who exhibit those behaviors, you go, this guy has it. Or this gal has it. Like, these are the product managers that go, wow, like this person really understands their space. They can navigate between explaining to you the customer problem that you're having, data to back it up, customer research and competitive research to show you where the opportunity sits, what the commercial plan is, and how we should be splitting our engineering work to deliver incremental value along the way. Like the ability to do all of that in one swoop requires a level of sophistication and thinking that I see in the best product managers that I've worked with.
No, I understand that. I mean, I've personally interviewed thousands of product folks, and it is just that with product people, it's harder to define because it's just, obviously you have to speak to them on the phone more so, and really they just get it. And you're just like, you get off the phone and you're like, yeah, that person is great.
What percentage of product leaders have you met that you think exhibit this raw horsepower?
In the region?
In general?
Probably 1%.
Yeah, it's hard, right? It's really hard to find product leaders. I think there's a lot of product leaders that go through a lot of the motions, right? They know how to run a team. They know how to prioritize a backlog. They know how to follow a process. They know how to use they know how to talk. They know how to use a 2x2 matrix to, do effort versus impact. That's all great, but I think what distinguishes a good to great is this raw, ability to have that intellectual horsepower.
I agree. I've become a big fan of Kobe Bryant and listening to all of his podcasts and books, and he was definitely someone who was a bar raiser, and you could see why. And it was all about that curiosity and learning, and even being on the court asking questions. But then not just asking questions, how does he bring that into his own game as well? And I think it's very.
And you hit the nail on the head. I think curiosity is a product leader's best friend. Because the more you ask why, the more you get to understand the intricacies of how things work. Mm-hmm. Why do customers do this? Why, does this tech solution work and that tech solution doesn't work? Why is it that customers resonate with this design, not that design? The more you get to the first principles of why things work this way, the more you're able to build that intuition to take better decisions and have that, synthesis capability.
Yeah. I mean, when I first came into recruitment, my colleagues around me would make 10 calls a day and I'd make 100. And I might have sounded stupid on the phone to people because I was just starting out in my career, but I just kept asking people questions. What is that? What does that mean? What is that technology? What is these terms? What is these concepts? How does that translate into the wider business context? But that built over years and years and years just gave me all of this knowledge and insight that I then sort of brought into kind of my own game, shall we say, as well. So I think it's really important. For sure. What's your advice to product leaders then in starting their first day on the job?
When I started at Talabat, I made it a point to not make any major decisions on team, on product direction, on anything really within the first 30 to 60 days of joining the company. I think it's very important for product leaders to really absorb as much as they can on the first 30, 60, 90 days and withhold quick judgment. Because there's so much that happens in a company. I mean, especially a company as complex as Talabat, a multi-sided marketplace, over 8 markets. It's very hard to get things right on day one. And I would say, you're trying to draw all of these patterns and understanding of what's been tried, what's not been tried, what are the biggest problems that the company is facing. I would say take the time to really not jump to conclusions. That's step one. And I would say then the next piece is spending time with customers. One thing that we do a lot at Talabat is we get, for example, our new joiners to speak to riders on day one. We get them to do a picking shift in one of our dark stores to see what it's like, running one of our dark stores. We get our employees to also be riders out on the street sometimes, to really experience what it's like talking to customers and doing deliveries. And by doing all of that, you're building an intuition of how the business operates. And I think that's very important to build that customer empathy and how all of this, comes together. And lastly, ask a lot of questions. I think it's very important to really go deep into every aspect of the business before coming to those conclusions.
No, I agree. I haven't got enough time for you to get a deep answer into that, but you touched on that sort of multi-product and marketplaces, which is a big challenge for any business. Do you have any advice around that?
Yeah, I think marketplace businesses, I love it. I mean, I've been in and out for 6 years and I wouldn't do it any other way. Just the intricacies of thinking about supply and demand and how, all of this comes together is just so fascinating. It's so fascinating. And I think it takes a level of you being okay with ambiguity and complexity to enjoy working in a marketplace business. I think a lot of product managers much prefer a simpler business model. I know I used to be in B2B SaaS. It was much easier to think about, a subscription that you sell and that's it. That's a product. So for anyone working in the marketplace business is, really, you have to spend even more time actually understanding the different parts of the marketplace and how they come together, right? We try and find these win-win-win solutions where, in our case, where the rider can get paid more, can ride safer in ways that grows our restaurant and grocery store businesses while, making our customers much happier. So what are the solutions that make the intersection of that really happen? I think that's what, your product thinking has to be in overdrive to find solutions that work for everybody. One example here is, for example, how do you make customers and restaurants much happier, in our ecosystem? Well, one thing is to think about, for example, how we do deals, right? Instead of giving everybody a discount, how do you do targeted deals where restaurants can say, hey, I really want to give a discount to people who've never ordered from my restaurant before, but I'm willing to give, instead of a 10% discount, much more, 50% off if you've never tried my restaurant before. Well, customers are happy because they see these 50% discounts, but restaurants are then able to have much better ROI on their ad investments because they're like, well, these are people who have never tried my restaurant before, so I'm willing to spend on that. So that's an example of a product which we have to actually make two sides of a marketplace actually really happy as a result of that. And that's what it takes to be a marketplace PM, and it's a lot of fun. Also screws with your head a lot, but we enjoy it.
No, awesome. And some final thoughts then, and some quick fire questions. What is your advice to young people that obviously want to get into product management?
Jump in. You'll never get it right. There won't be a perfect company. And there's no perfect time to be a PM either. There's no undergrad degree that you can take or course that you can take. So if you have an opportunity to be a PM at a company, jump in and you'll figure it out along the way.
What is your favorite product and why? I see you're a Whoop man.
A Whoop guy.
And I was just about to say I love their product.
It's actually one of the newer products that I've purchased,
okay.
and I love it. What I love about this whole connected self concept, I get to see what happens when I have to wake up at 3 a.m. to make some milk, and the days where I push too hard at the gym And it's really, I mean, defining sort of also my day to day. It's helping me sleep more. It's helping me work out more. So I'm actually really loving this as a product. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think I've had it now since maybe 2021.
Yeah.
2020.
Early adopter.
I was an early adopter, and then I was like, actually, this is just telling me what I already know. And then they made a lot of improvements, and I went back again in 2023, and yeah, I love it.
Excellent product.
What book would you recommend to the audience?
So my team likes to tell me that I prescribe books like medicine. So someone will come in and say, I'm really struggling with giving feedback. And I'm like, take this book, Radical Candor. I'll help you. Or someone comes in and says, I have imposter syndrome and dealing with that. I'm like, yeah, here, Dare to Lead. But anyway, if you're asking me the question of like, what, if someone wants to break into product, what series of books should they read? The author is Marty Kagan. Everyone loves him. But him and the SVPG group actually have a series of 4 books now, starting with Inspired and a few others, names I don't remember. But I would say these are amazing books for product leaders to work through, or people who want to break into product to work through. It gives you sort of the 10 out of 10 ideal vision and of what a great product organization could look like. Obviously, most companies don't look like that, and that's okay. But it gives you a bit of a sense of what a product company can be like.
Awesome. And what one thing would you like to leave the audience with in terms of building and scaling companies and getting it right?
What I like to tell my team a lot of the times is first who, then what. It comes from the book Good to Great.
Yeah, amazing book.
Yeah, amazing book. But if you focus on the people, everything else comes after, right? And if you talk to any successful product or business leader at scale, they will tell you that every hour that they've spent, instead of focusing on what, but instead on the people, yields 10x more results. And for anyone scaling, your breakpoint is probably first who, then what. Mm-hmm. So focus on making sure you have the right people on the bus.
No, I agree. That's one of the biggest things that I've been trying to coach the region on when it comes to talent and hiring. And there's a lot of resistance, but I think hopefully over time there'll be continuous transition and change in a positive direction. Thank you for joining Breaking Down Barriers.
Thank you very much for having me.